and welcome everyone today to today's session. My name is Vaibhav, as very briefly introduced. I'll tell you a little bit about myself and what we're going to look at today, and then we'll jump straight into the content. So my name is Vaibhav. I work as a senior consultant with a Microsoft partner in Dubai called Sulava. And essentially today's session is around M365 Copilot and how you can use it without the need for a license, right? Throughout all my experience with a lot of my customers, I've seen that that question does come up a lot, right? A lot of us want to use generative AI solutions and we want to use them for our work. But a lot of the times there's a lot of roadblockers about, what kind of licenses do we need? What tools should we use? And so on and so forth, right? So that's why I've curated this kind of a session today for each and every one of you who are interested in wanting to use a tool like Copilot or a generative AI tool, but with a few caveats there that I'll mention as we go through the content as to why you should be a little careful depending on what tool you're using and how you can use them. Right, so welcome today to M365 Copilot, no license, no problem. Right, so what I will do is I'm just going to walk through a couple of slides. I am more of a demo kind of person. So anything that you will be seeing on the slides, I will be showing you in terms of the demos, and majority of my content today will be by demos, right? So to jump right into this, right, before I actually get into some of these prompts that we're going to try out today, right, these are 3 prompts that I've found that really tend to elevate kind of the responses that you get from your AI tools. But let's take a step back, right? Before we actually get into some of these prompts, I do want to talk about prompting for those of you who are unfamiliar with it. Prompting, very, very simply put, is just the way that we communicate with these AI tools. It's how you give them instructions and how they understand what needs to be done, right? So that's essentially what we look at in terms of prompting or prompt engineering. Prompt engineering is just the way that we alter these prompts to change the functionalities of these tools, right? So jumping into these, when we go into some of these demos, I will talk about 3 advanced prompting techniques, right? The 3 that I'm going to focus on are going to be the role or the persona-based prompting. So that's where you give your tool a persona or an idea or a person or a role to take over, and it can then give you responses that are more specific to that, right? So like a good example of that is what would a top 1%, 0.1% person in this field think, right? You would add on instead of person, let's say we are giving it an investor deck, right? And I wanted to ask me as one of the top investors in the world, what are those kind of questions? Or what is, the best business analyst or business consultant in the world going to think about this? Right? So when you give it that role, it can essentially give you more focused answers. Then the second one is the flipped interaction style, right? Flipped interaction style essentially is, if you look at the first prompt that we're going to use today, which is to ask me clarifying questions until you are certain that you have enough information. We're flipping the generic interaction style. So generally, I would give it a question or I'd give it instructions and it would give me an answer. When we talk about the flipped interaction style, I'm essentially flipping the script and getting it to ask me questions so that it can gather information from me rather than me just giving it what I know and then guessing based on that. What this usually does, from what I've seen and from personal experience, is it tends to ask questions that may or may not have been explored by you when thinking about that topic, right? So when you flip the interaction style, it tends to explore broader ideas. And the last advanced prompting technique that we're going to look at is going to be the logic or the reasoning technique. So that's essentially where with your AI tool, you would prompt it or you would give it an idea or you would prompt it to essentially challenge and give you the reasoning behind what the thought process was, what the logic was, so that it can clarify that. And this is something that I have personally seen helps with a common problem that started up with the introduction of generative AI, which was hallucination in a way, right? When it would come up with content that does not exist, or it come up with figures, or it would come up with something that is not as logical as you'd like it to be, right? By asking it to do something, to reframe that, or to tell you the logic behind its response, it would essentially clarify that, or it would be able to introspect on that and then reframe that. Right, so these are the first three, I would say, prompts that we're going to play around with when we jump over to the demos and look at M365 Copilot. Then the second one, or the fourth one in this case, is going to be around image generation, right? I want to talk a little bit about generating images beyond just your generic, AI generated images. Common misconception that I've personally seen is that a lot of the times people think that the quality of AI generated images is always going to be a little cartoonish, or it's going to be very visibly AI generated, right? But what I want to introduce here is the concept of how your prompt and how detailed your prompt can be when trying to generate an image to create realistic and real, human-like images, right? And when we talk about that, I also want to very quickly take you through some of the different image generation styles, which you can see on the screen, depending on what kind of an image you want, right? This is all pieces of information that you can put into your prompt that can change the style of your image, right? It could be photorealistic. You can see there's examples of those given on the screen. It could be cartoonish, like we've seen. It could be, modern brutalist, neon art style, and so on and so forth. Now, this is a great thing to ask your tool as well, in this case, Copilot. You can ask it, what kind of image generation styles do you think would fit into my context, right? What kind of an image am I trying to generate? And based on that, recommend a couple of styles that would really fit what my scenario is, right? So it's things like those that we'll be looking at in terms of image generation. And personally, there is one example that I love to use, which is when you give it a reference object and ask it to use the reference object to generate more images in different styles, right? I'll pick one that I've used for this session that I run on how you can essentially build your own product and your company and kind of do the entire process of entrepreneurship, at least the initial steps, with the help of an AI tool and use that to generate some content, right? So we'll take an image of a box of a product that we have, and we're going to try to create some social media pictures for that. And then lastly, I'm just going to, based on the amount of time we have, these are just some examples that you will see on how you can use Copilot, especially in some specific work-related scenarios. Now, if you didn't know, M365 Copilot is essentially the generative AI tool developed by Microsoft that embeds within your productivity apps. But there is, licensing that goes along with that. When you have the full license is when you have access to Copilot in the individual apps, and it can help you do tasks within those apps. But all of these prompts that you're seeing on the screen and that we're going to look at today are going to be focused on those functionalities that don't need you to have any sort of licensing whatsoever. You can use it for free, just as long as you sign in with your work account, right? So we're going to try some of these out today, and we're going to play around with our Copilot. Now, again, I would love for this session to be interactive. So if you have any questions, you can go ahead and drop them in the chat. I'll be looking at it as we're going through the prompts. No worries, I can actually multitask while doing this. So with that, let's jump right in, and I want to show you what Copilot can do. Okay, so hopefully all of you can see my screen now. So what I'm going to do is I'll turn off my camera for a bit so we can focus on just the screen. Right, so now first off, we're going to start with our initial 3 prompts, right? So I'm going to take a generic task of mine here, which is going to be, just give me a second to pull up the prompt, to create a business plan, right? So I'm going to ask it to generally create a business plan for this digital product and community that I want to create. I have this idea for an AI academy for children. So I'm going to just go ahead and send this. This is generally how I would prompt or I would use any of my tools. And you'll see that it jumps right into it, and then it starts creating content for me. Now, one thing that you'll see here is that a lot of this content that it's creating, it's basically come up with on its own. Right? I never specified that I wanted it to be from ages 8 to 16. I never specified my target audience, what my product offerings were, none of this. Right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try again, though. I'll start a new fresh chat. I'll give it the same exact prompt, But what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to add my quick little prompt that I said, one of the three prompts, which is the first one, which is to ask me clarifying questions until you are 95% confident that you can complete the task successfully. I'll go ahead and drop this in the chat as well. And now let's see how it performs differently, right? So now instead of jumping straight into giving me a response, it's taking a moment to pause and it's going to ask me all kinds of questions where we're flipping the interaction style. Now remember, I spoke about some advanced prompting techniques where we're flipping the interaction style, right? The first one was the flipped interaction style. So I asked it to ask me questions. And now, as you can see, for it to start creating the AI Academy for kids, you would need to understand a comprehensive, piece of, information about the executive summary. What kind of market analysis have you done? What are your financial projections? What is your business model? And so on and so forth. So based on this, now I can follow up and start answering these questions one by one. So what is my core mission? My core mission is to essentially enable AI tools and learning for children. So like this, you can essentially keep going through this. What is my age group? I'm looking at maybe 10 to 15. And one thing about Copilots and generative AI tools in general are that they use something called large language models. So that essentially what that means for us in terms of traditional chatbots versus new generative AI agents or new chat interfaces in 2025 is the fact that it has something called a context window. What that means is that it has memory within the chat, essentially. So what I can do is instead of having to type out the question and an answer, I can do something like this. I can just put down 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 5, and it can automatically relate that this answer that I've given it is to question number 1, right? So that's essentially what these generative AI tools or LLMs are essentially doing in the background. Do I envision this to be a global platform or focus on a region? So I'm going to say it's UAE specific for Arabic speakers. Now I'm obviously just coming up with this stuff as I go. What kind of content do I want to offer? I want to offer videos and AI tool access within the platform. And what kind of curriculum, how will it be structured? It's going to be open-ended because obviously you're never done learning. What do you plan to include AI tools? Yes, absolutely. Yes, I do. Drag and drop style tools along with chatbots. And how do I plan to monetize this? I plan to keep this free of cost, funded by NGOs, for example. And will I offer certifications? Yes. Digital certifications, and so on and so forth. So as you can see, I'll finish off very quickly with the 15 questions. And this is essentially all the information that it generally would have hallucinated in the incorrect sense, or it would have assumed from my conversation. But here it's actually clarifying all of that before it jumps into creating this, right? So peer communities. Do I want to involve parents? No, it's going to be static content. So I'm just going to go ahead and answer some of these questions. And you can see that now, this time around, it's going to create the business plan and all the content based on what I have essentially already done. Are you planning to bootstrap, seek investors, applying for NGO funding, and no timeline yet? Suggest. So there you go. Based on that, it's essentially summarizing my content. And now it's about 95% sure, right? One final question that could refine the funding. So as you can see, it's, it may have missed out on something here. So I can say I'm going to align this with school curriculums. And there we go. We have our executive summary. And there you go. You can see that using just one simple line, which was ask me clarifying questions until you're 95% confident, essentially that's changed the entire that it would do, right? So now I want to essentially change this in such a way where we've got the executive summary, and I'm going to try to use my second prompt that I have available, right? And let me just quickly drop that in the chat here. And the prompt is, what would a top 0.1% person in this field think, right? So what I'm going to do here at this point of time is say that I want to pitch this to investors and NGOs. So instead of just saying what would a top 0.1% person, I'm just going to change that to investor in this field think, right? I'm going to add that one little line here. And there you go. So you can see it's going to focus the questions that it's asked on highly experienced visionary investors. They are selective, and you can see in the ed tech or impact space. And this is how they're more likely to think. So now I'm giving it a persona as well. So I've given it a role to take over, which is that of one of the top investors in the world, right? So they'll ask me based on my problem solution fit, what's the real pain point for this, right? And it's also giving me answers that I should be responding with based on the questions that they might ask. So this is my edge, or this is my essentially unique selling point for this particular scenario. In terms of scalability, this is what my opportunity is, the alignment with national strategy. And you can see it's already pulling in information about the UAE's AI national and digital transformation goals. And it's also mentioning alignment with the national AI strategy of 2031 and so on and so forth. Right. So already you can see that this is a lot more specific than just your generic prompts that it would normally give you a response with. So that's essentially how you can take this a little further. And it's also giving you things to take this one step further and strengthen your pitch as well. Right. And then lastly, when we're looking at the last prompt that I'm going to give it, it's to change the way that I'm actually thinking about this problem entirely. Right. So that's the third prompt, which is I want you to reframe this, right, in a way that challenges how I see the problem. So I want you to completely look at my idea of, teaching kids AI, right? So reframing the problem from teaching children AI to redesigning digital childhood for the AI era. Right? So this is essentially my current frame, and this is a solution-first approach, right? So essentially what this reframe is doing so and so. So I want you to actually focus this a little bit more. I want you to reframe this with a focus on my idea and challenge me to explore more undiscovered ideas. Right? So as you can see, now just changing the conversation just a little bit to challenge me and then reframe this and try to see how you can challenge the way that I see the problem, right? It's asking me, what if I'm thinking too small, right? What if kids could the AI, not just use it? What if they could co-create AI tools? What if, the platform became a youth-led AI lab, and so on and so forth, right? As you can see, in terms of undiscovered opportunities, it's doing so and so, and it's giving me a new strategic frame of reference. And instead of a free platform to teach children, AI skills in Arabic, it's a youth-powered ecosystem where Arabic-speaking children build, explore, and shape the future of AI, starting in the UAE, right? So essentially, this is how you can get these tools to challenge and reframe the way you are looking at certain concepts. And that is where the key benefit of these tools was mainly to be explored, right? Not for replacing the creative side of things. It's more to look at the vast amount of information that is available and apply that in that given scenario, right? So that was the first portion of our demos on the 3 specific prompts that you can add to your existing prompts to greatly improve how it actually can give you responses. And yes, absolutely, I can see there's a little comment from Vesa. Thank you so much. This is indeed a good time for any of you who have any questions about M365 Copilot or Copilot Chat and how it can be used. Please go ahead and ask me whatever questions you have in the chat, right? Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the actual platform, this is essentially our M365 Copilot. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to toggle on this little button that you can see there on the top right-hand corner. This is now allowing me to use GPT-5, which is now available even for the standard users with limited access. So now we're going to try to generate an image, right? So let me quickly pull on to the screen what I'm going to use for reference. And so this is what I have here. So hopefully all of you can see this image. So essentially what I have here is just this fictitious kind of product. It could be anything. It could be, perfume bottle. It could be, a toy, whatever it may be. In this case, it's this box of, it's a healthy snack box. And I want to take this image and let's say I'm trying to, start my own company and I want to put this out there as an idea. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my AI tool to generate a very specific kind of image that I can create and push out onto social media with this. So first off, I'm going to go ahead and upload the actual content. Now, to introduce the concept of linking or referencing data with this specific tool, which is Copilot, I do want to talk a little bit about this little plus icon and the little /, right? So when you click on the little plus icon, this essentially gives you options to add work content. Now, if you are logging in with your work email address, you will also have access to OneDrive with this actual with this Copilot. So that's a good place to pull in some documents, PDF files, Word documents, any kind of files that you would normally be using with your OneDrive. You can upload them from your device, and you can also communicate with agents. Agents are something I'm not going to go into today, but think of them like specialists that can do just those tasks. So I'm going to go ahead and upload this image. It is called Fit Fresh. And before I do so, right, I'm going to actually use my prompt coach, or actually I can just using this. So using this image as a reference, I want you to create a hyper-realistic image of the snack box on a raised platform with overhead lighting showcasing the name clearly. The box is angled straight ahead and is on a background of white flowy silk. right? Now I could have essentially, not type this out myself, but that's where the agents would come in. So we can try this out now with my prompt, and then we can try this again with my Copilot prompt coach created prompt as well. But essentially what I've done is I've used this image as a reference, and I've said, I want you to create another image, but based on the instructions that I give you for me to post on social media. So let's give this a moment. And the image generator can get to work and create an image fitting my description. Meanwhile, if any of you do have any questions, I can take those while we wait. Just in case I do run into an issue with the generator, I'm just going to go ahead and copy the prompt so I don't have to type that out again. Okay, let me just quickly try that again. The unfortunate demo effect. Okay, there we go. And now it's jumping into creating the image. So a little personal point to keep in mind here, the more detailed it is, it will take a little longer based on your prompt. So what I can do is I will drop a little prompt in the chat as well. This is something for a ultra realistic HD photo that I use for generation of images, just to showcase how these models, especially Copilot, can actually generate super detailed images. So this is a super detailed prompt that has been created with something called the prompt coach. The prompt coach essentially is like your Copilot, all about prompting and prompt engineering, right? So this essentially creates an ultra realistic HD photo of this woman walking against a beautiful background of sand dunes against the skyline of Abu Dhabi, which is the capital of the United Arab Emirates, just about an hour and a half of a drive away from Dubai. Okay, it's almost done. So the idea here was for me to generate these kind of images to be able to share on, social media for the launch of this product. I would like product launch looking images, something maybe I could have changed this prompt to be of, a person person holding the box up with a background of so and so. But as you can see already from what the image looks like, it is essentially creating the hyper-realistic image. It's on a bit of a raised platform, which I don't think is visible yet. But what is visible is the fact there is overhead lighting. So you can also position how the lighting should look like in the image with the help of your prompt. And as you can see, okay, there you go. So now it's on a raised platform and it's got white flowy silk as the background. And that's how it's created this image. Right, so that's how you can use the image generator. And I do admit it did take some time here today. But with the super detailed images, it might actually take some time. Right, so that's something to keep in mind. And I do want to point out that with the free to use Copilot, you may actually run into generation limits. So it's not that it is unlimited there. So unfortunately, I wish it wasn't, but it is sometimes going to run into generation limits. But that was how we can generate different styles of images. Now, this is just one of the tens and the 20 styles of images that I was showing you in terms of the slides. We could change this to make it, pixel art looking or, doodle or retro print looking, but we've chosen hyper realistic. That is the most, I would say, closest to human-like images. So then looking at just a couple more examples, we do have about 12 more minutes. So I want to jump into some of the use cases for how we can use this in terms of, a day-to-day work tool as well. And the first and the most, I would say, famous use case that would come up would be to use this for meeting notes. Right now, just as a little pointer, you do need to do a little bit of prep work, which is to download the meeting transcript from, for example, your Teams meeting. If you have the transcription turned on at the end of the meeting, you'd be able to download a Word document, which is the transcription of the file. Right? You can then use a prompt, which I will show you in just a moment. But that essentially is going to be the notes. So let me go ahead and drop that. So I could use something like this, saying, hey, here are the notes from our project kickoff meeting. Now, this is where you can either type in or paste your manual notes, which I can pull up. Or 1 second, let me see if I have the notes. That's strange. And you can also ask it to do it based on a template. So you have the option of putting in the template as well, saying here are the notes from the meeting, and this is the template that I want you to follow. I want you to follow this meeting. Unfortunately, I don't seem to be finding the transcript. May have gotten lost in some of the recent downloads, but let's just give it the okay. So following that specific template, it's going to generate your meeting notes and going to give action items assigned to people based on specific timelines as well, right? So that's one way you can do that. And another cool thing to show you about this is the fact that you can save this. Once you've sent a prompt over to your tool, especially Copilot here, you have the ability to save this as a prompt if you're going to use this regularly. All you have to do is go back to that prompt, click on the saved prompt button, and I'm going to give it a title here saying weekly meeting notes. And then I go ahead and hit save, and you'll see you get a little pop-up that this has now been saved in your prompt gallery. So whenever you start afresh, you can essentially look at all of these prompts that you have saved for yourself. And if you go over to your prompt gallery, you'll find your own prompts. And I've got my weekly meeting note prompt saved over here. Right, so that's a little tip for those of you who might and hopefully will start using this a little bit more often. And then let's take a look at some analysis work that Copilot can do as well. Right, so I have this prompt here that says below is our quarterly sales data, and here I will paste my data. let me just pull up some dummy data that I have available. So I have this little table. You can either copy paste this from an Excel file, or you can go ahead and link in the Excel file directly here. So I want you to tell me, what are the key trends by region? Are there any outliers? Visualize the results. And what this essentially does is it's using Python code on the back end. So the actual large language model here isn't doing the analysis of the data. This is actually using or leveraging Python code to actually do the data analysis and find information about that and visualize that data. So you can see this is the data. These are the total annual sales. And you can see there are certain outliers detected. And in terms of visualizations, it is tried to visualize these. So this is something that I've noticed as a little bit of a bug. This is when it's tried to create it, but it hasn't actually been able to display it in the chat here. So I can say, show me a line graph of the sales for Middle East. So you can clarify what kind of graphs and visuals you'd like to see, and it can visualize that as well. But one thing to note here is that these are static graphs. These are not going to be dynamic. And there you go. You can see that it has essentially visualized this, and it's also showing you how, as we've seen here, that this was an outlier that was detected. So it did see a significant spike from Q3 to Q4. And if it's something that I want to use in my PowerPoint presentations, in my reports, I can go ahead and download this, and I will have the image ready to use in my reports. Right, so that's a cool little feature of Copilot and how it can visualize your data, especially simple data. When it does go into multi-layered data and into these multi-layered graphs, it will tend to struggle a little bit. And also based on the amount of features you have in your data, from personal experience, I would recommend cleaning that up and trying to visualize a small portion of the data. If I had, for example, 100 data points, it would try to visualize all of that. And those charts do come out looking like a little bit of a mess, right? So just a couple of pointers to keep in mind. Now, in terms of some of the other capabilities, like for example, for HR employees, if you're trying to generate, insights based on some content or screen CVs, you can see that you essentially have multiple CVs here that I can that I can link. And again, these are all fictitious. So I'm going to ask my Copilot tool here to compare and analyze these candidates. For example, if there was a job description, I can then go ahead and give that job description as well. But as you can see, you do hit a limit. For the free version, you do have 3 files at a time. You could then paste the content here, or I can describe it. For a marketing manager role, I want you to give me the results. Now, it's very important here to specify how you'd like to see the results. Give me the results in the form of a table comparing their work experience. And then talking about the reasoning kind of portion of that, I want you to give me your logical reasoning for each of the candidates on them being a good fit. So I've given in 3 of the different candidates. Now you can see it to work, and we've got our information available. right? So we can essentially have a star-based rating, a numerical rating, and we've got so and so, right? It's got a recommendation summary, and you can see trying to visualize this for all the 3 candidates. And then lastly, what I want to show you is how we can export this to use this later, right? If you look at this little button here at the very bottom, this says edit in pages. What this allows you to do is take the responses that Copilot is giving you and play around with them in an editable format, right? So this is the prompt. And this is something called a Copilot page, right? So this allows you to export this directly into Word. This allows you to share this with your colleagues. For example, if it's a team of you working on that particular role and you're trying to use Copilot to summarize different candidates, you can do that together and post all of those responses into this particular singular chat. And you can then export this directly to Word as well, right? This allows you to use something called Copilot Pages, which is a really interesting and a powerful tool to add on to your Copilot Copilot capabilities. Now, lastly, I will show you one last piece of. So obviously, there's a lot of different prompts. I will go ahead and share those in the chat as well. But looking at the time as well, we do have about 3 minutes left. I think I can get about 1 or 2 couple examples in as well. So I have some prompts here. One is for daily planning. And again, I'm going to start a new chat. Now, why do we do this? Now, going back to the technology itself, large language models, since they have a context window, if you do dump a lot of information within the same chat, it essentially loses memory in a sense in the same chat, which is why we always recommend if you're changing the topic, you do so in a new fresh chat, right? So I can list down my different tasks for the day. And I've just told it here, I have a team meeting at 9 a.m., a client call at 11:30, and a report deadline by 3 p.m. Give me a schedule for the day with these events, prep time, and I can say, give me this in a table. Okay, so it's giving me timelines for the day. And I'm going to say also add in some breaks for coffee. And it's putting in little refreshers with my timeline from 8 a.m. up until 3 p.m., right? Then we can use Copilot or any of these AI tools as research tools as well. But there is a caveat here that I would like to point out is the difference between using something that is meant to be a search engine, which is like your Google, versus a generative AI tool. So when I ask it, for example, give me a brief on the latest trends in renewable energy adoption in the Middle East. And now I'm going to turn on GPT-5 because I would like it to spend a little bit more time doing the research. So coming to the differences between the two, right? When you're using a traditional search engine, it is essentially using some sort of keyword or keyword matching to give you hundreds, if not millions, of search responses, right? But what this does, what your generative AI tools will do, is essentially pick 2 or 3 of the most important sources. As you can see, it's picked just a couple of sources, and then based on the information from there, it's going to summarize that content and give you information back, right? So it's not as, I would say, exhaustive, but it is more direct and it is to the point as to what you are expecting to see, right? So if you are looking for a wider piece of information, I would stick to kind of the traditional way of doing that. Or if you're looking for specifics based on a source and you can give it sources. So for example, I can say, give me the latest crude oil. I'm going to say Brent crude oil price from, and I can give it specific URLs. It can then go to that specific URL, and you can see it can pull information out of that specific source. So if I go back to this, you can see that it has used the URL that I've given it, right? and it's giving me the information based on that, saying it's $67 per barrel. So I do see that we have hit our time limit. So I will go ahead and paste some of the prompts in the chat as well, but we can essentially take question and answers now.
If you want a low microphone for the participant, so don't hesitate to ask your question with your microphone.
Hi, this is Lars. Question
Hi,
regarding
Lars.
the data privacy with Copilot Chat, so without dedicated Copilot license. Where is gonna an uploaded image or files be stored if I upload an image or a CV?
Got it. So that's a great question. Now, when it comes to anything to do with M365 Copilot, this particular, that's why I said it's important when you're signing in with your enterprise licenses. So when you're signing in with your enterprise email addresses, you have something that's called enterprise data protection that applies to this chat. Right. So I'm going to split that on the question of yours into two sections when I answer it. One is I'll talk a little bit about the data security and the privacy, and then I'll talk to you about where that data is stored when you're uploading documents. So because it's a Microsoft tool, I'm just gonna sign in, zoom in a little bit here. You'll see that as long as this little green shield is available, this is essentially telling you that enterprise data protection applies to this chat. And this means that these are essentially, to put that simply, it means that Microsoft nor OpenAI can actually use this data to train the models further, since it is bound by EU regulations as well. They're not allowed to store and use your data to train any of the models. Now, coming to the second part of your question, when you are uploading or putting in any content into this chat, since we're using our work accounts, this is being stored in my personal OneDrive. So if I go back to my OneDrive here, essentially in my files in my OneDrive, I will have a little section over here that says Microsoft Copilot Chat files, and you'll find all the documents that you uploaded within the Microsoft Copilot Chat in this particular location. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, so there's no difference between Copilot and Copilot Chat, so with or without dedicated Copilot license, assuming
yes,
there is a M365 license, of course.
Yes. So if the user has an M365 Copilot license, essentially what that means is that expands also your knowledge base. So in addition to your user's OneDrive, it's also going to be using graph content as well.
Okay.
But yes, they're essentially the same.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome. Can the agenda be copied directly to Outlook for reminders to switch to a new task? That's a great question. I haven't personally tried that, but I don't see why not. But the issue that I would see there is because it's in a table format. When you copy that into, for example, Planner or Task, essentially you would be putting that all in as one task. So I haven't personally tried that, so I wouldn't be able to give you feedback on how that is. Hi, Vaibhav. Thank you for the wonderful session. Thank you. That's very kind of you. How can we add our faces to a realistic image? So again, like I showed you the example of uploading a sample image when we were trying to generate an image. So if I go back to my previous conversations, this, by the way, is a new feature. If you just go to all conversations, you can just look for the conversations you had previously. You could essentially add, let's say a headshot of yours. And that is something that a lot of my colleagues actually do when they're trying to announce sessions, public speaking sessions like this, like myself. You can put in, or you can upload images of yourself and ask it to create, reference images. So as you can see, you have up to three reference images that you can put up. So you could do one, which, one being the banner of the event that you're talking about. One could be a headshot, one could be something else. And with your prompt, you could essentially get it to create an image that incorporates, your faces into that realistic image. Okay. Any other questions? And yes, so what I will do is I'll quickly just jump back over to the slides. So in case those of you who'd like to, look at the QR code, you can see the feedback QR code, and I'll also stick to the prompts that I had available earlier. So I will be pasting some of these in the chat as well. So these are just some of the examples that I was using for different roles and personas. So for example, if you're a data analyst, that's how you can do that. For HR managers or HR employees, you can do so and so. For a research analyst, you can use prompts like this. And for different kinds of personas. So with that, that does bring me to the end of just a quick little walkthrough on how you can use Copilot completely for free in your work tasks, and how you can use some of those 3 prompts, which I would love for you to try out, by the way. I will be showing you my last slide. You can add me on LinkedIn. If you do try them out, I would love to hear from you how that actually changed the outcomes of your prompts. So yeah, I would love for you to try that out and reach out to me. But thank you all very much for joining today's session, and back over to you.